Welcome back. This is National Geographic Weekend. I'm Boyd Mattson. Why do we do what we do? Well, we can't even explain our own behaviors. Have you ever had your spouse say to you, "Why did you do that?" And then you have no logical explanation? Well, imagine if we can't explain ourselves, how are we going to explain what other creatures that don't even talk do what they do? And yet, that is what researchers try to find out. Brian Hare is a researcher who is studying bonobos, one of the great apes, and he's trying to figure out why they do what they do without them even ever being able to confirm or deny their reasoning. He joins us now. He's a professor at Duke University. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you so much, Boyd.
How are we ever going to find out why animals do what they do? And why do we want to know? Is it because that will then explain why we do what we do?
It's true. It's a tough job. But, boy, it's a lot of fun. So, I think that's right. We should back up and say, well, why even do this at all? And essentially, it is that we share our biology with the great apes. And by studying how they behave and how they solve problems, it really helps us reflect on our own behavior and maybe understand a little bit more about the origins and the biological basis of why we may make some of the mistakes we do, why we learn the way we do, why we solve problems the way we do. So it can really actually have real-life applications in helping us solve problems we're always having a hard time with.
Well, if there's an ape that we should be studying, it is the bonobo, because they are known for not making war, but making love. In fact, I don't know of any other species that gets along quite as well, certainly not in the ape family. So maybe we should study them to see where we went wrong and how we can get back on track.
That's exactly what we're after, is that, I study chimpanzees as well. So that would be sort of the Jane Goodall species that everybody's really familiar with. And I also study bonobos, and there's two species of chimpanzees. Both bonobos and chimpanzees are considered chimpanzee species. It's sort of like having two uncles that are equally closely related to you, but they're still different people. So
are the bonobos the drunk uncle that shows up at Thanksgiving?
Yes. Well, yes, and that's interesting you say that you bring up Thanksgiving, because chimpanzees, of course, everybody's heard of. We're familiar. They're in the media all the time. If you look online, you're seeing press releases all the time about interesting discoveries about chimpanzees. You rarely hear about bonobos. So it's almost as if we have this one uncle we always invite to Thanksgiving we're really proud of, and the other uncle, we don't want them to come to the party. We're kind of a little bit embarrassed about them. So that's unfortunate, because bonobos, like you say, really have solved some serious problems that our species and chimpanzees cannot solve, which is that never has it been observed that a bonobo kills another bonobo. So, when we wake up in the morning, there is the chance that someone might kill us. I mean, that's a real possibility as a human being, and it is as a chimpanzee. But if you're a bonobo, wake up in the morning, you don't have to worry about that. So, how do they do it? How in the world have they solved this problem that we can't do?
Not only do they not kill each other or go hunting after other species, they also have developed something that is really rare in animals, and that is sharing. And by the way, we're talking with Brian Hare, who does the bonobo research, associate professor at Duke University. This is unusual to have apes sharing.
Absolutely, because, one of the things that people have been excited about when thinking about humans is one thing that might make us really different from other species is that we really enjoy actively sharing with others. At least that's the argument of economists. That's the argument of many psychologists. And the argument has also been put forth that this is really unique to our species, at least especially among other great apes, and that in our species evolution, this is something that really changed and might explain why we're so different than other animals. But we went and did some work with bonobos, and it ends up that we found that they also enjoy sharing, and they share in many ways, in similar ways to our own species. Now, one thing that's very interesting about bonobos, though, and probably the most important thing that may explain, one, why they don't have lethal aggression, and two, why they are so good at sharing, is it ends up that it is females that are sort of in charge more than males.
We're talking with Brian Hare here on National Geographic Weekend about his bonobo research. A few months ago now, I guess, we had his wife on the program, Vanessa Woods, who has done some of the work in the field with Brian and wrote about it in a book called Bonobo Handshake, which was kind of a euphemism for the fact that the bonobos like to greet each other with sexual gratification. I guess is the only way to put that. Maybe they use sex to relieve tension, to remove tension and aggression. Whatever it is, that's also a common part of their daily communication.
It absolutely is. And actually, hot off the press, just today I got an email that we have a new paper that was accepted in a journal called Primates. And the paper that was accepted, we were trying to understand exactly the behavior you describe, which is that when there's social tension in the group, bonobos actually get really upset. And we know that they get upset in a very different way than chimpanzees. Bonobos, when there's a social conflict, they actually have a rise in a hormone called cortisol, which is a hormone that's released when you become stressed. Whereas chimpanzees, in the same context, when there's some kind of social problem, they have a release of testosterone. So essentially, bonobos sort of have, oh my gosh, we're not getting along, and chimpanzees sort of have the reaction of, hey, we're not getting along, somebody's going to fight, and I'm going to win. So it's totally fascinating. In the same context, they have a totally different physiological response. But the new paper was, why is it that then bonobos, when they have this social anxiety, they tend to rub genitals? And everybody rubs genitals with everybody. I mean, there's no real discrimination.
You mean everybody being all the bonobos? All
the bonobos, that's right, not the bonobo researchers, thank you. People have asked the question, why? Well, one of the things you can think about is how the behavior develops. Because it could be that bonobos sort of learn over a long period of time that, hey, this is just sort of the culture in bonobos.
And it feels good, by the way.
Well, interesting, their genitalia has evolved, particularly in females, to facilitate this type of contact between two females so that they can actually rub their genitals together, and I think it probably feels much better than if two chimpanzee females did this. The study was to look at baby bonobos and baby chimpanzees. So we have been working with a sanctuary called Lola Ya Bonobo, and what we found was that even at 2 years old, when you, for instance, bring food and present it to the bonobo babies, they have this genital contact with each other. The scientists call it sociosexual behavior because it's not actually reproductive, and clearly it's not in infants. But even little 2-year-old infants, when we bring food, they basically rub themselves all over each other. And when we went and watched chimpanzees in the same context, you see nothing.
Essentially, chimpanzees, the way they settle their arguments, they're carrying a handgun, and bonobos are carrying a vibrator.
That's right. You've got it.
That nails it down.
Much quicker than I could. Absolutely.
That's the difference between the two. Well, I just think that the bonobos are fascinating in what they can tell us about a behavior that went a little differently, and the fact that there's something we can learn from them is interesting, and that's part of what you're studying. So, Brian, thanks for giving us the latest in the research of bonobo behavior.
My joy. Absolute pleasure.
What do you think of when you think of Japan? Mount Fuji, cherry blossoms, sushi, things on the surface that you can enjoy. You probably also think of the latest electronic technology, too. But there's a whole other world to Japan found under the water, and that's the world we're going to visit. They have everything from tropical seas to ice-covered oceans. We'll explore when we return here on National Geographic Weekend. I'm Boyd Matson.